Moving on now, President Muhammadu Buhari says his government is tackling the challenges of corruption head-on.
Yeah, he made the declaration in New York while addressing delegates at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly. President Buhari stated that there is no threat more potent than poverty and exclusion. Describing poverty as one of the greatest challenges facing the world, President Buhari noted that its eradication is an indispensable requirement for achieving sustainable development. Joining me now is the rights activist, Nelson Ekujumi. Nelson, good morning. It's good to have you join me right now.
Thank you very much.
All right. Poverty has been there from the, even from the foundations of the earth, like someone would say. And with the realities, social, economic, political realities across the world right now, how realistic is it for not just countries of the world, but for Nigeria to talk about eradication of poverty at this time?
Well, thank you very much. I think the statement by President Muhammadu Buhari at the UN General Assembly is very, very apt. But we must realize that we can only tackle poverty or minimize poverty if, as individuals, as a country, we up our game with regards to the acquisition of skills. Severally I've had the occasions to talk about this matter, and I tell people that, look, why any human being will remain poor is because you don't have anything to sell. It's either you have gone to school or you have acquired a skill or you have a talent that is in hot demand. When you have that product within you, that means you can put a price tag on it. And with that product, you can earn a living. But when you have neither of all these requirements, definitely you'll be at the beck and call of every nook and every person, and you'll be
and every situation.
You'll become like the whipping child. So it is important for us as a people looking at tackling poverty that we should look at our educational system, we should look at our vocational training such that our youths, we should say in 2030, right now we have over close to over 10 million children out of school. How do we eradicate poverty when you have this army of youths that tomorrow they wouldn't have acquired any skill?
Exactly. Now, one other thing that is of great concern the president raised was anti-graft, the issue of corruption, which threatens the country and perpetuates poverty out there. Now, if we have to start from there, how would you rate the fight against corruption in Nigeria? A lot of people certainly have given a commendation to the president so far, but others still say there's still a very long way to go.
Yes. That's the reality of life, that there's always two sides to a coin, or even three, the middle part as well. So, but the truth of the matter is that this government has said the piece with regards to tackling corruption in the history of our democratic process. If you remember when this government came into office in 2015, a lot of personalities of the previous government were indicted for corrupt practices, and even as we speak, quite a number of them are still in detention. And you would have seen some technological innovations that have been introduced to up the game with regards to fighting poverty. You talk about the BVN, you talk about the TSA, you talk about the whistleblowing policy. These are innovations aimed at expanding the anti-corruption war. Whether anybody likes it or not, if you look at the scorecard, you give the government a big kudos, with regards to how they have gone so far, even though there's still a lot more to be done.
All right. Nelson Ekujumi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. President Muhammadu Buhari says his government is tackling the challenges of corruption head-on.
He made the declaration in New York while addressing delegates at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly. The president stated that there is no threat more potent than poverty and exclusion. Describing poverty as one of the greatest challenges facing the world, President Buhari noted that its eradication is an indispensable requirement for achieving sustainable development. Well, joining me now is the rights activist, Nelson Ekujumi. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast, and good morning. Now, the president says the country is, or his government is tackling corruption head on, and some have challenged that statement, so to speak, because some have said that this fight against corruption has been one-sided, and sometimes the government shuts its eyes to certain allegations being made when it comes to certain persons.
Well, thank you very much. I think those allegations, is very typical of the human nature. Like we have this saying in Yoruba land that, it's impossible for you to walk and for your head not to tilt in one direction or the other. That you cannot walk upright like a statue, they are human being. So be that as it may, I think the government has done very well with regards to the fight against corruption, even though some people have labeled it all sorts of names. But the question we ask repeatedly, those that have been alleged of corrupt practices by the government, were they really indicted for corruption? Has there been any instances of innocent persons being alleged and being prosecuted? And the answer is no. People say when somebody is in Party A, he's not prosecuted, but when it comes to Party B, you also want to recollect that even 7 top functionaries of the government, of the party in power, today are standing trial. I'll give an example of Dr. Orji Uzokal, whose trial started from the days he left office as the governor of Abia State, and even as we speak, he left office in 2007. And even as we speak in 2019, he's still in court, and several other persons like that. So for me, I think what you can do as a people is to continue to encourage the government to do the needful with regards to corruption because of...
When you say the government to do the needful, how do you mean? Because there's an issue of the whistleblower policy that some have said has suddenly withered away somehow, because initially we saw, the drive when it was introduced, and suddenly there's nothing much happening with regards to that.
Well, I think if you want to have more information about, those issues regarding the anti-corruption war, I think the agencies involved are the ones one should interface with. Why we had all that fanfare at the early stage of the whistleblowers policy is that when you have, it's just like when you have a new baby, definitely everybody will be your guest. But as the baby grows older, he or she becomes the responsibility of the parents alone.
So how do we strengthen these institutions quickly?
Well, there are several ways the government has gone in that direction. We have the whistleblowers policy, we have the TSA, we have the BVN, and as we speak, people are coming up with ideas on how to strengthen, the anti-corruption war, such that the effect of corruption in the economy will be, whittled down to the barest minimum. All
right, Nelson Ekujimi, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
It's a pleasure.
Muhammadu Buhari says his government is tackling the challenges of corruption head-on.
Yeah, he made the declaration in New York while addressing delegates at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly. President Buhari stated that there is no threat more potent than poverty and exclusion. And describing poverty as one of the greatest challenges facing the world, President Buhari noted that its eradication is an indispensable requirement for achieving sustainable development. Joining me now is a rights activist, Nelson Ekujimi. Nelson, it's good to have you join me right now. Right. Now, the personality of our president has, right from the 80s, that everyone knows him, has been against corruption, and he's Mr. No nonsense when it comes to that, and everyone knows him for that. However, if we look at the fight against corruption in Nigeria over the years, a lot of people say that there are times when government really wants to fight corruption, you see it being fought in a very decisive way. But when sometimes it seems to be divided, where some people feel, okay, it's a witch hunt, and others, and all of that. How do you rate the fight against corruption in Nigeria?
I think in the history of governance in this country, I think this government must rank as one of the best, or one that has made, very determined effort to fight corruption head-on. Even though the government has been, saddled or confronted with the social malaise of, ethnicity, religion, and what have you. But be that as it may, I think as citizens, we owe ourselves the collective responsibility to encourage the government, no matter its shortcomings, no matter the name calling, that look, the fight against corruption is not about, Buhari is not fighting corruption because he wants to benefit President Muhammadu Buhari alone. It's because he wants it to benefit the generality of the Nigerian people. So that should be the larger focus, that look, what belongs to us all is being cornered by just some few. And the essence of government is for the benefit of all and not the benefit of a few.
All right, how far away from winning this war are we really? I remember former Minister of Finance, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, wrote a book that was talking about fighting corruption is dangerous. And in the book, she was trying to, you know, bring to fore some of the challenges he had, even from people who were within, and the way some of the idea of corruption fighting back was. How far away from winning this war are we?
We are still a long way, I must be honest with you, because there are some basic infrastructures that we are supposed to have. You know, we operate a system in this part of the world where the system takes care of you only when you are still active. The moment you are out of the system, you're on your own. And that is why a lot of persons, while they are in office, tends, to gravitate towards corruption. You have a system whereby the basic infrastructure, you look at the health facilities, you look at education system and what have you. You are the one that will provide for yourself. You don't have even a social welfare program whereby people who are unemployed can be taken care of. How do we take care of our elderly citizens? You see people dying on queues, people traveling long distances, people being old 2 years, 3 years, gratuity and what have you. So these are the factors that go a long way in aiding corruption. Until we start looking at those indices that motivates corruption, we'll continue to battle corruption. It will be like we'll be running after corruption every time. We don't have a plan on ground that we curb corruption totally. So I think going forward, there's a need for us to look at all these indices, that a situation whereby as a citizenry, I provide my own electricity, I provide my own roads, I provide my own
government
security.
in yourself.
I'm a government myself.
All right, so it has to do with putting a system in place that can take care of people even after they've left the system.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nelson, for coming on the program.